Yes, we are live here with none other than Bill Anderson, former Herb Abrams UWF performer. He's also wrestled for WWE, ring announced for WWE, refereed for WWE, been the head of a WWE ring crew for many years on the West Coast. We've had him on numerous times, and he's back today. So we're happy to have you back. Also, one of Billy Graham's closest friends. So, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Devin. Thank you for having me back on. I really appreciate it. And as I've told you before, off camera or on, you're one of the hardest working YouTubers out there. Your channel never fails to deliver, and I'm not talking about me, but top rated talent and that sort of thing onto your channel for interviews, shoot interviews, your news, everything. You're right on the money, and that's why your channel is growing faster than anybody else's, maybe besides Joe Rogan, I guess.
Yeah, maybe he's the one I aspire to be like. He's just a monster. Now,
Oh,
you actually had COVID not too long ago, and you overcame it. Could
yes.
you tell us about that battle that you went through and what they used to treat it?
Well, gosh, I don't. That was so long ago now. They gave me a particular drug, and now I can't remember. I think I had messaged it to you. It's some long name, but I had gotten over it. They put me on a medication and told me to stay alone, have bed rest, uh, just take it easy, and just alienate yourself from the world, which I've done basically for the last 14 months anyway. So. I took a lot of time and I drank a lot of water and I didn't eat that much. I wish I would have lost some weight, but unfortunately that wasn't part of the equation with me. But I did get through it through a lot of rest and sustaining myself alone from everyone in my bedroom, basically just watching TV. Got caught up on, I watched the entire, I think it's 9 seasons of Seinfeld, and I just watched a lot of movies and just as you tuned in, I was watching Grunt, the wrestling movie, on behind, and it's a scene that I'm in. In fact, I was just getting to it. But I've been watching a lot of TV, unfortunately, through when I was having COVID. But I got through it. I had a lot of deep chest pains, a lot of coughing. Really, the worst part was the headaches were really intense. I felt like I was getting hit by a Mick Foley chair shot every day of my life there for a few weeks. But I got through it, and now since then I have had both my vaccine shots for the COVID, and so I think I'm good to go here. And hopefully our country's slowly getting back together. I know Canada's got some issues right now that it wasn't so bad last year, and now this year it's even worse, I guess, from what I'm hearing from you, Michelle Starr, and other people I know from Canada. So, but I got through it, and thank God. And I just did a lot of rest and staying away from people, basically.
Well, we're glad you overcame it, and I'm a huge fan of Grunt the Wrestling movie. So
Yeah.
anyone that hasn't seen that movie, if you're a fan of 80s wrestling, you got to check it out. Maybe you
Oh,
could tell us about your experience in that.
well, Red Bastien got me my part. Red was the technical advisor for the movie, for the wrestling choreography, and Red uh, was fantastic. You know, I was living with Red Bastien during this time. This is during the time we were actually, I think we had just finished training Sting Warrior and those guys, but Red got me my part, and him being on the set along with John Tolis, Steve Strong, who played the Mask, Magic Schwartz, great friend, great guy, great actor, been in Stallone movies, and the Destroyer, Dick Beyer was in it, Adrian Street, of course, uh, Bill Grant, the bodybuilder. There was a lot of fantastic talent in this movie, and a lot of other local wrestlers, Jack Armstrong from LA, and just it was a wonderful, fun thing. And as I've said 100 times, because I worked in maybe about 10 movies in Hollywood. I would have done every one of them for free. Getting a paycheck for doing them was just a blessing on top of it because I had so much fun on the sets of all of those kind of movies. Grunt was a really fun movie. When I was in Body Slam with Roddy Piper and myself and Tim Patterson, wrestled Roddy Piper and Tonga Kid in a match. It's kind of like a background scene for their, I don't remember the exact scenario, but they're filming something, an interview, and they're showing the match like in a hazy background in that scene of my match with Roddy. But working with him, what a beautiful human being Roddy was, and miss him every day. I've had some great opportunities like that with Hollywood, and I would have done them all for free. And Gene LaBelle, I have to credit Gene LaBelle. Gene got me some parts. One part on a TV show, I got cut after I signed a contract. My part got totally cut out. 6 months later, Gene said, "Have you gotten paid for that yet?" I go, "No, why would I get paid for it? This is back in the 80s. And I says, "I didn't work on it." He says, "You signed a contract, you get paid." And he made sure I got a check in the mail. And that's the kind of guy Gene LaBelle always has been for the wrestlers. Really fantastic man.
And one interesting thing about Grunt is the Destroyer actually appears in it without his mask.
Yeah. It's there. What's really funny is there was a topless scene in that movie with this girl that was playing a French actress, she was the manager of the mask. And they do a topless.
What a pair she has, by the way. That's worth checking out.
But it was just so strange. They took every human being off the set except one cameraman to film her topless scene. And it was like, people are going to see her anyway. What is the big thing about all of us guys, and other women even on the set, not being live on the set there to watch it? It's like like we haven't seen that before, really. It was just kind of a humorous thing. I remember that was back in like 86 or something like that, 85, 87. I don't, it was 35 years ago, whatever it was. It was a long time ago.
The one thing I did find strange about that topless scene was it's pretty much a kid's movie, and it's very much a kid's movie other than that scene. And it made me wonder, why did they put that in there?
Exactly. And it served no purpose except to entertain men, I guess. And absolutely stupid, but I agree with you 100%.
Dan O'Malley is on here. He works for the Arnold International Sports Hall of Fame, and he actually has my picture with him up on his profile. He wants to know how much interaction you had with the Tolos brothers.
Well, I actually never met Chris Tolos. I saw him wrestle many times in Detroit at Cobo Arena when I was a teenager aspiring to be a wrestler. I used to go to Cobo and see all the greats, Bobo, Sheik, and all of them. I had my interaction with John Tolos, the Golden Greek. John was a very good friend, wrestled him several times, and I had a lot of interaction with John for different wrestling promotions. The WWF, when he was the coach, I was around John a lot then. When he was working for Herb Abrams, I was around John, and I wrestled John on WWF shows. So he was one of my heroes. He was one of my main inspirations to break into wrestling. Was John Tolos and his feud with Freddie Blassie in 1971, and the famous Monsel's powder that was thrown into Blassie's eyes and blinded him. And I was watching that live on TV, like thousands and thousands of people were in LA, and I was living in middle area of California, in Oxnard, Santa Maria area, and along the coast. And I watched that, and I said to myself as a 15-year-old kid, whatever I just watched on TV, I want to be a part of that when I grow up. And I didn't know anything about wrestling at that point. So I started following John Tolos and Freddie Blassie and Michael Bell's promotion. And that's what really inspired me to be a wrestler, was John Tolos, because to me, he was the ultimate heel. And then when I would go back to Detroit and visit my father, where I was born was in Detroit, my dad would take me to Cobo Arena, and then I would see the other ultimate, no pun intended, ultimate heel of the Sheik, Eddie Farhat. Was the greatest of all time. They just don't make heels like him or baby faces like Bobo Brazil. Those guys were just my heroes. And I got to, in Detroit, see the Kangaroos and Ben Justice and the Stomper and Tiger Jeet Singh, who I would later wrestle in Japan about 18 years later. Along with the Sheik, I had opportunities to wrestle and team with him in Japan. Again, those are just dreams from a 15-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid, watching these guys in arenas in sellout crowds, having the opportunity to actually wrestle them when I was bigger, and those were dreams come true, that sort of thing. And actually, for that matter, Devin, growing up in Detroit, I never would have dreamed I'd ever be living in California, working in some movies, wrestling movies, and that sort of thing. That was just never a part of my dream in life. I never could have figured that would have ever happened to me. So I had some unique opportunities that I worked hard for them. Meeting the right people, and as you know, as well as anybody, it's who you know more than what you know. I wasn't some fantastic stuntman or anything else, but Gene LaBelle hired me as a stuntman for a couple movies, and so it's who you know, and you go with the flow.
Now, we were talking about this before we went on the air here. Matt, one of our YouTube members here, wants to know if you saw the Ultimate Warrior A&E biography. I wasn't going to watch it, but somebody sent me the Daily Motion link, so I was able to watch it, and I did a review of it. And I was quite disappointed overall with what I saw, other than the parts from his wife and children.
Right. I did not see it. I don't honestly know if I really want to see it. I can tell you, and I'm being very honest with you, I was contacted by the producers for this show about, I don't even know, 4 months ago, perhaps 5 months ago. And a gentleman left a message on my phone saying he was a producer for an A&E special they were doing on The Ultimate Warrior. Would I be interested in doing an interview? And perhaps as unprofessional as it is, I didn't even return the man's call. Because I thought, okay, here's going to be another chance they'll end up cutting everything I'm going to say, because I'm only going to say good things about Warrior, which is not what anybody really wants to hear. Everyone wants to hear the negative on the man. So I just figured I'm just not going to waste my time. Not that my time is all that precious, but I've talked about Warrior so much to so many people. And I thought, okay, here's somebody I don't even know, even though obviously I watch A&E for their specials and their shows. They're a great channel, but I just didn't know this guy. And I just said, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to spend an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours on a phone and talk with this guy. I didn't think anything might even come of it. So I didn't even do the interview. I didn't even call him back. So I do want people to know I was contacted probably as a trainer, and the guy was probably, smart to contact me. Red Bastien has passed on. We were the in-ring trainers for the Warrior and Sting. So he was smart to contact me. It's just, he caught me at a time in my life. I think that might have been not too long after I was getting through this COVID thing. I just was kind of worn out talking about Warrior. And when somebody I don't know contacts me, it's just like, oh, here we go again, another Jim Hellwig bashing. And it's like, I just don't even feel like doing it. And of course, now many months later, it's out and about, and maybe I could have been on TV. I could care less. That means nothing to me.
Well, you have something in common with another guy that was involved in your training with the Warrior, Rick Bassman, who I know you don't always get along with, but he also turned them down because, as you know, he didn't have the best experience. And he just said he didn't want to go down the negative route, so he didn't call them back either.
Exactly. And it's sad, but that's just the way I looked at it. I didn't know that Rick had been contacted, and I don't know. I know people won't understand this, but fans of the Warrior would probably never understand why you would ever get tired of talking about it. But I just know Warrior from my perspective of how he treated me and anyone around me, all my other wrestling students, Louis Spicoli, Ricky Ataki, Tim Patterson, my tag team partner for years. Whenever we were around Warrior, he just treated us with just such respect and praise, and told the guys they were in the right camp with Billy Anderson, that kind of thing. So that's the only kind of Jim Hellwig, the Warrior, Ultimate Warrior that I know, is that man that was just gracious at all times with me. When he saw me, it was nothing but hugs and kisses. And he was the same way with my wife, my son when he was around them. So I respect that man, and I can't sit here and badmouth him. The thing is, the bottom line with Jim was a businessman. He wasn't necessarily a big wrestling fan. He was a businessman, and from a business point of view, he did what he felt he had to do in his career. And if it meant not taking a lot of bumps because Vince McMahon, his boss, tells him that's the style I want out of you, run to the ring, do your boom, 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 all your fast stuff, clotheslines. If that's what they want, it saved his body a lot of wear and tear, and he still made millions and put butts in seats. To quote Eric Bischoff, it put butts in seats.
Yeah, they completely glanced over his success and seemed to focus on the negative, and it's unfortunate. And they didn't even mention his time in WCW. As far as his training, they didn't even mention you or Rick, although they showed the picture with Rick and him and Sting and the other two.
Right.
But
well, I'm sure they were.
Seemed like the Gold's Gym guy was responsible, by the way.
Yeah, that's strange. I'm sure they were quite irritated at me for not even respecting him enough to call him back. And I don't know how Rick handled it, if he just turned him down over the phone or whatever. That's his business. But I'm sure they were very irritated, and they figured they're going to get as far away from mentioning Bill Anderson as they can get away. And that's all cool, because I never did anything for the glory of training Jim Hellwig or Steve Borden or Dave Sheldon or any of the guys that were in that class. It wasn't a matter of making money. I was doing favors for my friend Red Bastien. That's the only reason I was in the ring with those guys. I'd have probably jumped over the railing at the Grand Canyon for Red Bastien. That's how much I thought of that man. I didn't really care just to follow through with another interview. And believe me, Devin, I've turned down a lot of even podcasts, even recently. I did one with a friend recently, but I turned down interviews all the time, because I know a lot of time all we're going to do is head right into the Ultimate Warrior. And I understand that he was the biggest name I ever trained. And then probably second would be Sting. And then, Dave Sheldon, the Angel of Death in Texas, and Louis Spicoli, of course, and guys like that. But you finally, after 30, 40 years, 35, 36 years ago is when we trained Sting and Warrior, you get really kind of worn out telling the same stories and that sort of thing. And it was a time when I was real busy wrestling myself. My career, I was in my prime. I was like 30 years old. I was in my prime back then. So I was very active, and they were just a part of my life at that time. They weren't all my life. I was wrestling in main events in Mexico, and all during the training time, even taking time off from training those guys. I tell Red, I got bookings I got to keep up with and do. And so it was just part of my career, part of my life, and no regrets training the guys. But man, I didn't know it was going to be talking about it for the next 36 years.
Now, as far as Sting getting his big contract in AEW, I'm sure you're not a big AEW viewer, but what are your thoughts on Sting at this point in his career? He's in his 60s, signing a long-term contract with AEW and doing matches again.
The only thing I can say is God bless him. I haven't talked to Sting in maybe about 15 years. I suppose maybe the last time it was at an athletes ministries conference here in Phoenix with Billy Graham and the Road Warriors and those guys. Well, it was longer than that because Hawk's been gone since 2003. So it's many years ago. Last time I talked to Sting. Hey, if he's still making money, I know he's a family man, a very, very solid family man. If he's still able to make money and live off his name, I know his body's broken down a lot from in his prime. It has to, although he's always stayed in shape and everything, and I respect that. But if he's still able to make money, God bless him. If there's promoters still willing to pay for him and see him, and his name is still respected, bless him. And I have only watched AEW one time, just on the record. I watched one show and I liked it, but like you always say, I'm not into all the gymnastics, and all it is a marathon match, a marathon run. through a cycle of holds, moves, it doesn't mean anything to me.
Now, I only found out about this. I was misinformed by a fan the other day regarding Buck Zumhoff, and I reported it as current, but I guess it was about 6 or 7 years ago that he was put in jail related to his child molestation stuff. Someone's bringing his name up. Did you ever have any encounters with this Buck Zumhoff?
Actually, I honestly don't think I've ever even met him. If I did, if I was on shows with him, it might have been at the Showboat Hotel, and we would have been in opposite dressing rooms that were across the arena from each other, the Heels and Babies. I actually don't recall ever running into him, but like everyone else, I have zero respect for the man. I guess this was his daughter he was molesting. I mean,
there was a few, but most recently it was his daughter. But I guess in the 80s there was a couple other children prior to this stuff.
He's obviously a very sick man, and maybe he's going to get the help he needs in prison, or maybe prison will give him just what he needs. And you know, whatever. Good luck to Buck Zumhoff, because you've earned every day in jail you're going to get, brother.
Dan O'Malley wants to know if you ever wrestled Bobo Brazil. You were saying he's one of your favorites.
No, I never did wrestle Bobo. I was on in Tennessee. Bobo, I was wrestling for Goulas and Jarrett back in 1975 in Tennessee. And Bobo did come in to work some shows in Chattanooga. I believe it was Chattanooga. And he was in the dressing room, and I was with Chris Colt and Mike Boyette and Bill Dundee, and we had our own little faction of guys. And I didn't even walk over to say hi to Bobo, because the group I was with, Colt and Boyette, they frowned on fraternizing with all the other guys. It was like, keep to yourself. Don Fargo was part of our group. He would hang with us, and they were like, don't talk to the other guys. They were, you know, that they consider stooges for the office. Like, oh, there were some certain guys down there that they just said, stay away from all those guys. And I just hung to myself in the dressing room, and Bobo was right there. And he was my hero, you know, from when I was a teenager. So I never wrestled Bobo. I wish I had. Always respected the man. Yeah, that's a guy that was really the ultimate babyface. You know, besides like Mil Mascaras and those kind of guys, they were lifelong baby faces. And Bobo was just a hero of mine.
As well as your buddy Tito Santana was also a lifelong baby face.
True. I know. You know, like they always say, I guess sometimes if you have nothing good to say nothing. If you know, so I won't say anything. You know, I mean, Tito's Tito. You know, he was a good worker, solid worker, and you know, he made money. He made money in the business.
Voodoo Ray, who has a pretty cool profile picture here, says, any Gene LaBelle stories that you would like to share? You already talked a little bit about how he helped you out in the movie business.
Well, I can say something that Gene's probably not qualified to say because of lawsuits, but, you know, everybody's maybe heard the story of him and Steven Seagal. You know, Gene LaBelle is just nobody to mess with. You look at him as maybe Gene's like, I don't even know, 88 years old now. I think he is, or 87. And but he's nobody to mess with. And Steven Seagal kind of put him on the spot talking about fake wrestling and something like this many years ago. And Gene hooked him in a front face lock and knocked him out cold right in front of all of his other acting people, his friends, and other stunt people and production. And Seagal sued LaBelle and actually had him thrown off the set and everything else because he carried more weight than the stuntman, Gene LaBelle. But Gene is nobody to mess with. I went to Gene's studio that he had in Beverly Hills many years ago with, I can't think of the MMA guy, Russian guy, that he had like a partnership in a studio there. And I watched Gene, and Gene was training, and he was Gene's, well, he would already been 70 something years old, and he was in a pink gi, which is what he trains in. And it's just like, he's so funny to be around because he's so, he's just the greatest guy. He's like your grandfather. He's like the sweetest man could ever be around. Yet he could literally kill you with a finger. That's how tough the man is. And that's what I love about Gene. He never has to prove it to anybody unless really provoked. And that's what the greatest part about being around Gene is. He's not a bragging kind of guy. He's just a real unassuming type of human being that you would never think, there was any threat of violence with him at all. And but man, what a tough son of a gun. And very loyal to his wrestling friends. He would always get his wrestling friends work, which is what I really respected about Gene. He wasn't just Hollywood. He would always take care of like Alexis Smirnoff or Professor Tanaka, Count Billy Varga, John Tolis, Red Bastien, H.B. Haggerty. He would always take care of the guys that were in the business because he knows how hard we struggled to make a dollar. And one movie I worked on where Gene got me a part, it was called Alligator 2, The Mutation. And I played the part of a guy just sitting at a table in an arena setting, and Professor Tanaka comes out of the ring, and it's like a dinner tables that are set up. And Tanaka comes and hits me because I got up and I was like angry because he bumped into my table. This is one of those movies I would have done for free in a heartbeat. So Tanaka chops me and I have to take a bump over a table, and I hit another table and blah, blah, blah. And I just go out of screen. I was supposed to get $1,500 for this scene. And Gene came over and he saw a big lump on my shin that had just welled up instantly. He says, "Are you hurt?" And I says, "No, I'm not really hurt." I says, "I'm in a little bit of pain." He says, "Well, don't sell it to the other production people." He says, "Just walk it off." And he says, "I'm going to get you double pay because of the bump you took." And he did. So I got double my pay because he went and says, "Man, you're risking my these are my guys, my stunt people. You're risking them. Too many bumps. So let's pay this guy double." And I sure enough got double pay. I would have paid them double to have been just to hang out. I was with Chavo Guerrero, Alexis Smirnoff, Jack Armstrong, and Professor Toru Tanaka, all my friends. And I might add Count Billy Varga. And Gene LaBelle on the set. So I would have done that for free. So Gene is just a fantastic man, and God bless him. He's still alive and kicking. Fantastic person. Could never say enough good about guys like him and Red Bastien in particular, both of them.
And he's featured heavily in that Ronda Rousey documentary on Netflix, which I was happy to see. Yeah, Dave Daniels wants to know if you're in touch with Bobby Duncombe and if you've heard how he's doing. I know Bobby Duncombe Jr. has passed away, sadly.
No, I'm not in touch with Bobby Duncombe at all. No contact whatsoever.
There's a few people on here that are asking if you'd consider Sting and the Warrior two of the all-time greats. I think pretty much everyone would say that.
Well, yes, from the era that they came in the late 80s and early 90s in particular. I mean, my God, who wouldn't want to watch Sting against Ric Flair or Warrior and Orndorff or Warrior and Hogan? I mean, they were big for their era. They were, it's like trying to compare a boxer, like saying, was Sugar Ray Leonard a better fighter than another guy from 30 years later or 20 years later or 20 years before? It's an era that they were in. They were perfect for it. And that's why Sting and Warrior both became world champions for their promotions around the same time, around 89, 90, just years after they had broken into the business. They were at the right place at the right time. It was the right talent. They had the right body look for what they needed at the time, what the promoters were looking for. And, now I don't think Sting and Warrior had a better body technically than Sting, not better ability, but better body. I I don't know that Sting would look that outstanding now if he was breaking into the business in 2021. I don't know. I don't know how it would look nowadays because I don't follow the business at all. Like you said yesterday, I don't even know who the Intercontinental Champion is. I don't know who one champion of any promotion is, and I'm not really embarrassed to say it. It's just I let it pass me by. I'm into other things in my life that appeal to me more at this stage of my life, and part of it's something that you like, and I like to go to cemeteries. I'm very relaxed at cemeteries, and I'm going to be making a big road trip, Devin. I'm going to be driving from Phoenix all the way to Jacksonville, Florida, coming up in July. I'm going to be going to the graves of all of the band members of Lynyrd Skynyrd that have passed away. And I'm also going to be paying my respect in Mobile, Alabama, to Paul Bearer's grave. The man that did the foreword for my very first book, Bill Moody, was a very, very good friend of mine, a very nice man. And I'm going to be going through Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and I'm going to be stopping at Ernie Ladd's grave. And I'm going to be passing through Houston. I'm going to go to Gino Hernandez's grave. Although I never met Gino Hernandez, I'm going to pay my respects to his grave. And I'm going to Mobile, Alabama, to the wedding of Mike Boyette. Mike the Hippie Boyette's daughter, Christy, is getting married, and she asked me to walk her down the aisle. And I had talked to her a while back and told her that me and her dad were very good friends 46 years ago in Tennessee, and Mike saved my life twice. Twice he saved my life. Once positively, the second maybe more in my mind than anything. But Mike Boyette was a good man, and he passed away several years back. So Christy asked me if I would walk her down the aisle in lieu of her father, who's not there anymore. And I said, what an honor. What an honor. And I'm going to do that. So that's a big thing for me. So I'm going to be doing some videos along the way and going to the graves of Paul Bearer and Lynyrd Skynyrd bandmates, and Howard Hughes in Houston, and Gino Hernandez, Big Cat Ernie Ladd, and several other people. And I'm also going to try to stop in and say hello to my old friend, the One Man Gang in Baton Rouge, who lives there. I haven't seen Gang in 20 years. So I got a big road trip ahead, and got a lot of cemeteries to go to. And that's more what I'm into than watching wrestling, current wrestling product on TV. To be honest with you, I'm in this movie, Grunt the Wrestling movie, and I can barely get through that because it's just the wrestling I kind of get tired of. But I do like to see my friends, Adrian Street, who does stay in touch with me all the time. Adrian's a great guy. And John Tolis, who I just went to his grave out in Chatsworth, California a while back, 2 months ago. Went to John's grave and did a video for my YouTube channel, Big Bill Anderson's Death Tours. John was a very good friend of mine and a very, very, very decent guy. And I was around John quite a bit. And so I pay my respect to my friends. And that's the least I could do for Paul Bearer and Ernie Ladd, who was a great friend of mine too.
Yes, and you've had a bunch of comments on here from people that like those grave visit videos. And of course, you post pictures of those on your Facebook page too. Anyone that wants to follow you at Bill Anderson. Bronk has a question. He says he's enjoying your interview. He seems to remember you working in Phoenix with Tito Montez. Could you talk about it? The Phoenix territory was a mystery to him.
Well, Tito Montez was another guy that was, Tito's been gone now about 10 years or so. Tito was like a father figure to me when I started out wrestling here in Arizona in 1974. Tito was one of the biggest baby faces that I've ever seen in my life. And I watched him in Phoenix Madison Square Garden Arena. It was a building that was built in 1932. Jim Lundos had it built, the wrestler here in Phoenix, and owned it for quite a while. And Tito Montez was so big of a baby face to the Hispanic people that every show fans would bring him sombreros or a vest or food. They would bring him bags of burritos or I know that sounds silly nowadays for fans to do that, but this is what they thought of this man. Tito wore rings on every finger. He was probably Ringo Starr would have been envious of him, and fans would bring Tito rings and bring him jewelry, necklaces, hats, everything every week. One of the greatest baby faces I've ever seen. And I went a long time without seeing Tito because I had been living in California. But I showed up at the 2000 CAC reunion at the Riviera Hotel in Vegas. It was a year I was given an award along with the Crusher, Reggie Kosowski, and Steve Stanley, and there was all kinds of wrestlers getting awards that year, but I was getting mine. And I had not seen Tito for 20 years at that point, 20 whole years, and saw Tito in the casino as I was walking through, going to a restaurant or something. And our eyes locked on from like 40 feet away. And it was just like that. You've ever seen the couples that like, they show like a slow motion couples, like in the movie 10, running along the beach and then they come and hug. That was Tito and I, because we had both changed a lot in 20 years, obviously. And but we loved each other. He was a good solid man, good family man, and just one hell of a wrestler. Really knew how to excite the fans here in Arizona. He was a legend, complete and total legend. And we used to do reunions here from 2005 through 2011 every year until Tito passed away. And then it's a lot of the guys have gone now, so it's I'm 64 years old, and I'm the youngster of the whole group of guys. Back in those days, they were all in their 20s, and I was a teenager, and now we've all just drifted off and just hung out last weekend with two of my dear friends, Tony Hernandez and Nando Ortega. They're both 79 years old, but they were just like young guys when I was around them, and now we're all just getting on up there. And, Billy Graham turns, 78 in a couple weeks. So, it's everybody's getting older, and, we got to, spend some time with our old friends when we can. And if not in person, then at least go to their graves, which is what I like to do. And I stand and say some words over their graves. And with Mike Boyette, I'm going to be able to, he is not buried anywhere. He's not interred anywhere. He has ashes that are in his daughter's closet. And I actually am taking a gift as I fumble here. I am taking a gift to her of an urn that I bought for her father for his ashes. Mike served in Vietnam. He was a United States Marine Corps, and I bought an urn for his daughter to put Mike Boyette's ashes in. And I'm doing this to pay my respects, and it's my way of thanking Mike for saving my life. And Mike's in heaven, and but hopefully he'll look down and say, "Thanks, Bill. I appreciate you remembering me." And that's why I'm driving all the way to Mobile, Alabama, and not flying. And I want to spend some time with his kids and his family, and pay my respects to a friend from 46 years ago, and I'm not going to forget him.
Now, you brought up Billy Graham's name. His health battles have been up and down. He lost one of his toes recently due to diabetes-related infection, I believe. He's having some iron deficiency issues. Some fans have been very generous on his GoFundMe, which people can look up Billy Graham, and I think he has the link to it on his Facebook page. But I know you stay in contact with him. Do you have any updates on him?
Not really. I haven't actually talked to Billy in a couple weeks now, since he was going through all his tests at the Mayo Clinic. I like people like yourself that know Billy real well, know you have to give him a lot of space, and you can't overcrowd him with too much yapping and too much emailing or calls or anything. You have to give him a lot of space. He's his own person. He's dealing with so many health issues, relating back all the way back to his liver transplant 20 years ago. So it's like I give Billy a lot of space, and if I don't hear from him for a couple of weeks, I allow that, and I don't panic about it. I know he posts some things here and there on his Facebook page, but Billy is a very unique person. Obviously, that at 78, he's able to survive all this time with the ailments that would have knocked many people down years and years ago. I mean, whether it's through multiple hip replacements or ankle fusion or liver transplant or, you name it, Billy's had it done.
Hep C treatment that he successfully went
Yeah.
through and his heart issues.
I know. Yeah, exactly. There's so many, you can actually forget some of them, like I just did. I was like, yeah, let's not forget Hep C, and his diabetes. I've been in restaurants with him a million times where he's sticking himself in the stomach, and testing his blood and doing this, doing that. And it's like, oh my God, he's a walking miracle. And I had heard that Diamond Dallas Page reached out to him and tried to get him maybe some help with his with DDP's yoga, and Billy says, I'm not in good enough shape to even get down and do yoga. I can't do that kind of thing. He appreciated it because DDP's got a heart of gold, and but Billy says, I can't even, I'm not in good enough health to even deal with that. And so now if DDP wants to reach out to me, I could probably use some help. And I'm just at a point with bad knees, and I've had back surgery myself, where I could probably use some help and some guidance from a pro like that, and a man that really cares about people like DDP. But Billy's a little too far gone on that part.
I agree. And with I couldn't sadly see him the last time I was in Phoenix because he had only had one of his vaccines at that point, and I hadn't had any. But the time prior to that, I mean, just walking 15 feet, you could tell he has a heart problem because, like, he needs to rest.
Yeah.
Just to walk 15 feet.
Yeah.
So, incredibly tough man.
Oh, yeah. And like I've told a couple friends of mine, when you give Billy a hug, that guy, his back is still so solid and thick that it's not like your fragile 78-year-old normal man. When you say somebody's 78, I don't know who to say to picture, but he's not your typical 78-year-old man. He's still extremely thick, upper body thick, and so God bless him. He's got genes that are phenomenal, and let's pray and hope that we never have to say goodbye to that man. Because he's been a dear friend for 30, 40 years. I mean, I first saw Billy wrestle 48 years ago in Vern Gagne's AWA in Chicago as a fan. Watched him walk down the aisle. I think he was wrestling maybe Nick Bockwinkel, maybe Billy Robinson, one of those guys. If it was Billy Robinson, I know he was not in a good mood that night because he does not like Billy. He did not like Billy Robinson.
Yeah, I don't even want to imagine the day that he passes away. That's not going to be easy. No. It makes me sad just to think about. But right. Rick Brooks says that I guess at one point in time, the original Sheik waved him into a dressing room, spoke to him and gave him an autograph. And he wants to know, as someone that knew the Sheik, how rare would that have been for the Sheik to do that for somebody?
I would say probably pretty rare. When I was with the Sheik on a couple of tours in Japan for a month long, Sheik stayed at a different hotel. Us on the tour, we called it the Sheik Hotel. It would have been the equivalent of a 5-star hotel. And we had to stop and pick him up every day for that. And Sabu was with us in what we called the 1-star hotel for FMW. And but Sheik was very nice to all of us and treated us all with a lot of respect and everything. But he would not break character. I would think it would be a very seldom thing he would ever break character for anybody, because he really prided himself on being the man of mystery and not talking a lot and that sort of thing. I think that's extremely rare for that gentleman to have gotten an autograph or a picture like or with him or anything like that. It's real rare, real rare. And Sheik was a really great guy, legend.
There's a fan on here that says he saw you wrestle Jimmy Snuka for California Championship Wrestling. You ripped a shirt off of a guy that he thinks was a plant in the crowd who tried to take your ring jacket. Do you remember this?
I remember it extremely well. And I can tell you who that plant was. That plant was Michelle Starr, who is Mark Velios, who lives in Vancouver, BC, who I trained back in 1986 or so, I believe, 86 or 87. And Mark was the ring jacket boy. We tried to get him some work, break it in. You learn from the bottom up. I learned setting up rings, ring announcing, refereeing. You learn from the bottom up, and told Mark, you want to be around the business? Mark was later a part of my ring crew with WWF. And I said, you can take jackets. And the deal with that was I was wrestling Snuka, and Snuka was the baby face and I was the heel. And I told Jimmy, I said, Mark is very intimidated by you, because he was still just a young kid. He was 16, 17 years old, just a young kid. But he was one of my students, so I knew Mark very, very well. And I said, Jimmy, do me a favor when you go out to the ring, because Mark thinks you're a wild man, just take his shirt, just rip it apart. And Jimmy was like, oh, brother, I can't. I don't, the poor kid. I don't know. Maybe it's his only Sunday shirt. He's wearing a tie and everything. I said, Jimmy, he's one of my students. Do it. It'll scare him to death. And Jimmy wouldn't do it. And Jimmy really didn't want to mess around too much. So I did it, and I messed around with him. But I love wrestling Jimmy Snuka. Jimmy's another guy that dearly missed. And I think about him all the time. Every time I see a picture with Jimmy or see videos of Jimmy, I think about a lot of great memories. Wrestled Jimmy for the AWA, wrestled him in Hawaii. Myself and Tim Patterson wrestled him and Rocky Johnson, and beat him for the belts in Hawaii and lost him back on another show. But, still, they put us over, and that's the kind of guy Jimmy and Rocky were. And it was business. And wrestled Jimmy probably a dozen times, and loved working with him every single time. He was always a very good man, always treated my son very good from when he was a newborn, all the way up probably until, I don't know, he was about 8, 9 years old the last time my son was around Jimmy. But Jimmy was a very good person. But I remember that incident, and that kid is Michelle Starr now in Vancouver, who went on to become extremely successful on the west coast there of Canada, and in Washington and Vancouver, BC.
And he also did a lot of WWE enhancement work. For those that don't live on the West Coast, they might remember him from those days. There's a fan on here that says, when you, Chris Colt, and Boyette were traveling together, what would you be listening to in the tape deck? Oh,
that's very easy. It was 50% Janis Joplin and 50% Joe Cocker. That's why 2 years ago I went up to Crawford, Colorado, where Joe Cocker, great British blues singer, is buried. And Joe had a ranch up there, and I went to his grave and did a video, and it was very meaningful to me because I'd listened to everything Joe had produced. I'd seen him in concert 3 times. So I grew up listening to Joe Cocker because of Mike Boyette and Chris Colt. And the other was, Janis Joplin was a great influence on Chris. And Colt actually in England became a bodyguard roadie for Joe Cocker in the late 80s, I believe. I was around Chris at 75. And I'm going to go up to Chris's grave too. He's buried in Cottage Grove, Oregon, a couple hours south of Portland. And I do want to go up to Chris's grave and pay my respects. I do owe that to him. He was an influence on my life. It gave me a break going down to Tennessee with him, having a chance to wrestle a lot of guys down there. And now that we're talking about Tennessee, I want to make one mention too. You did one of the best interviews I've ever seen with Tommy Rich. And Tommy Rich, one of the great, I believe, more unsung talents than people give him credit for. I know he was an NWA champion at one time, but I think Tommy Rich was a really, really great wrestler. And I got to work with a tag match. Myself and Mike Boyette teamed up against Tojo Yamamoto and Tommy Rich in Evansville, Indiana in 1975. And Mike Boyette played a rib on me for that match because it was like a 45-minute time limit. It was like a semi-main event match. And Mike wouldn't let me tag him in. So I had to stay in and work with Rich and Tojo. And Tojo, anybody that ever worked with Tojo, he chops the living crap out of you. He chops you until you're a bloody mess. And he did that to me. And him and Rich are just cracking up and laughing because of how much harsh treatment I'm getting in the ring. And every time I reached over to tag to Mike, Mike wouldn't tag in. And he was playing the rib back on me because a couple weeks before, Mike had a bag of marijuana. And I told Mike, Mike was driving and Chris Cole was in the front seat and I'm in the back seat and we're driving down some highway in Mississippi. And I told Mike a cop car had pulled out right behind us. And I said, Mike, did you see that cop car? And he says, yeah. I said, and Mike had a joint going. Chris did too. And I says, Mike, that cop is eyeing us and he's going to stop us. And I don't know why Mike was listening to me. I was just barely 18 years old. I was just a stupid punk kid. Mike took his joint, threw it out the window, and took his whole bag of grass and slowly got rid of it through the window. And then the cop finally went around us because we started slowing down and going so slow. So Mike was so mad at me, but good mad. He was not mad enough to hit me or be that upset. He played the rib on me 2 weeks later where he wouldn't tag in and let me work the whole match, 45 minutes with those guys. So I think of that kind of funny things like that when I think of Mike Boyette and Chris Cole and the time in Tennessee that I had. And Tommy Rich, your interview with him was just beautiful. I loved it. One of the best I've seen. And Tommy is a very underrated guy, real great talent. And he said in that interview, I want to correct something too. He said he started in 1976 when he broke in. Well, I was wrestling him in 75. This would have been in August of 75. I was in the ring with Tommy, and he'd already been wrestling for quite a while at that point. He was already working when we came in June or July of 75 to Tennessee. And he had a beautiful red Cadillac or Continental or something like that, convertible. Everybody had their CB radios and everybody had a handle. I don't know what ours was at that time, but it was a different era of time. We had no cell phones, no computers, none of that. It was just you talk to friends on the CB, and what a forgotten thing that is anymore. You talk about that.
Now, did you ever notice back in those days, I know it was before he was world champion, but I've heard several people say that the screams he would get in his younger days from the females was actually louder than Hulk Hogan's reaction because he was one of the most beloved male wrestlers ever, on the same level as the Von Erichs.
Yeah, in fact, I was just going to say, I would actually kind of, as I recall, again, it's been, my God, 45 years, 46 years, but I would compare him to a Von Erich reaction. The fans love Tommy Rich. He was only 18. He's like the same age as me, give or take a couple of months, 2 or 3 months either way. We're up the same age. And Tommy got fantastic reactions by the fans. They didn't have any other baby faces kind of like him because Lawler was a different kind of baby face. Jerry Jarrett was kind of phasing down his wrestling a lot, and he was more promoting. And then some of the other baby faces you had were guys like Tojo Yamamoto, oh my God, I don't know. You just didn't have a lot of like good-looking baby face type guys. And Tommy with the blonde hair, he was a real hot baby face for them down there. And he did get he incited the girls, and that's a whole story off camera. I can tell you a lot of stories involving the craziness of those days and the women, the things I saw, and as a youngster, man, I'll never forget.
Yeah, you mentioned Bill Dundee earlier, and he told me the story of him and Tommy Rich had what Dundee's wife called a whorehouse on wheels when they each had their vans that they would drive to the events.
Hey, let me tell you something about Bill Dundee. what a stand-up guy Bill Dundee is. And uh, those trips down there in 1975, we were driving like 400 miles a day most of the time. We were based out of Nashville, but you know, you had Monday in Memphis, Tuesday could be Louisville, Kentucky, or Johnson City, Tennessee. You had, you know, it was a big 3 show a night, big circuit there of like 7, 8 states. Huge circuit. So your car took a beating. And Chris had some, like, I think it was like a Buick Electra, whatever it was called. And we burned that engine up down there alongside the highway coming out of Johnson City one night. And we saw Dundee the next morning that was on a Tuesday night. On a Wednesday, we would do TV promos in Nashville that they'd send out to all the towns. So the next day we ended up hitchhiking home. And if you want to hear a funny story another time, you ought to see me and Boyette and Colt hitchhiking along the highway. All of us with blonde hair. Colt's was streaked. Mike had half blonde, half black, beards, carrying suitcases. Bunch of hippies just walking the highway in the middle of the night in 1975. It was a different era in 1975 than it is now. Now, I don't know. It's just totally different life. And we got a ride by an old couple in an RV. Picked us up. They actually stopped. I don't know why they didn't think they were going to die that night, picking us 3 real mangy looking guys up. And they gave us a ride back to Nashville. So we made it to the studio the next day, talking to Nick Goulas and Jarrett and everybody that was there. And Colt was telling everybody, yeah, my car burned up. It's alongside the highway. It's gone. It's in flames. He just left it. And Dundee said, after the tapings here, after we get done doing our promos, come back to my house. I've got an extra car, because he was driving, all the guys were driving brand new cars because they were making big money down there. They were making real good money. And he says, come by my house. I got an extra car you guys can use for the remainder of the time you're here. And we went to Bill's house. And sure enough, Bill he loaned us a car. And we drove that for the next 2 months. And then at a point, not long after, Boyette kind of got out of that area, and Dundee became our partner, actually. So we would travel still with Don Fargo, or we would travel with Bill Dundee to a lot of shows. But for other shows that Bill wasn't a part of our team or anything, we still drove his car, and never charged us anything for it. It was just a friendship thing. I mean, that's a big thing for a guy just to loan you his car and just say, here, go for it. And put another 100,000 miles on my car, because it was long drives. It was a pretty brutal circuit down there at the time. But what a place to learn. I mean, I learned a lot down there.
Now, I doubt you've watched Young Rock, but KJ has a question. Is the TV show Young Rock anything like reality in its depiction of Hawaii wrestling in the early 80s?
I have not seen Young Rock, and really don't have any intention on seeing it. It's one of those things that in my life now, it kind of still hits too close to home. It's too much a part of my former life that, I didn't know Dwayne when he was a little kid, although I was probably around him because I worked a lot of shows for Ata Johnson and Rocky Johnson when they were promoting in Hawaii in 86 and 87, I believe. I was working shows for Liam Maivia, and they were running opposition to Ata. Their daughter and mother were running against each other. And I loved working Hawaii, but mainly it was because of just the scenery and the beaches and all that goes with being in Hawaii for 3 days. To go for one night show, Leah would fly us out and have us stay for 2 or 3 days, which was really great. Me and my partner, Tim Patterson, we loved every minute of it. Hanging out on Waikiki Beach with King Curtis Iokea, and doesn't beat that, looking at the pretty girls on the beach, how are you going to beat that? So, and we stayed at the Waikiki Circle, which is right next to Waikiki Beach, and it was just a beautiful place. But I don't know what exactly he's referring to about Hawaii wrestling. I do know, I can tell you, we wrestled a lot of big Hawaiian guys. Tim and I did, and I think a couple guys named Farmer Epo and another guy named Leroy Brown, not the Leroy Brown from the United States, from the States, the mainland. was a Hawaiian guy named Leroy Brown. Big, big, big men, and they were brutal on our bodies. But you know, you take it all in. It's part of the business. You're doing it. You're wrestling in Hawaii. It's beautiful.
Colonel Quayle wants to know if you ever wrestled in WCW.
I did a couple of WCW shows only when they ran some shows in California in the 80s. I did not work for them like out of Atlanta or anything else that they did. It was only some West Coast things. I worked a couple of shows. I worked with Dick Murdoch on one show. I did a tag match against Terry Taylor and Eddie Gilbert. And I did another match against Pez Watley and Tiger Conway Jr., whatever. They had a team name. I can't think of the Jive Tones, I think it was. And I wrestled like 3 matches for them during that time. And I went to a couple other shows that they promoted, but I wasn't booked on those to wrestle.
Now, Tony would like to know if you ever wrestled in Minnesota.
Only in WWF TV tapings. I wrestled in Rochester and Duluth, Minnesota in 1988. I took Louis Spicolli to have his very first match against Outlaw Ron Bass on TV tapings, and one night, and he wrestled, I think it was Greg Valentine the second night, and did outstanding. But that was the only wrestling I did for Vern. For AWA, I did not work for Vern in that state, only WWF tapings. I worked for the AWA in Las Vegas, many shows.
Now, here's a good question, something I didn't know about you, but the Smart Mark fans will be interested. Ryan wants to know, what was it like wrestling Tenryuu at Wrestling Challenge in '93?
I remember the match. I was very intimidated because obviously I've been around the business a long time to know that Japanese wrestlers up their game quite a bit more than Americans for the most part. And Tenryuu was trying to impress a lot of people. And I knew that meant he might be a little extra stiff with somebody that he doesn't know, and especially an enhancement talent, which I was. I was probably the Black Knight or something like that at that time, wearing a mask. And I was a little intimidated working with him, but I don't remember getting hurt at all. He treated me real good, but I remember the match.
One thing I still hold the grudge against WWE for is when they had Tenryuu, and I don't know, Bobby Heenan called him Hand Towel. I don't remember his real name, but they beat Demolition at the LA Sports Arena where you used to ring announce, but none of the American fans other than the real super fans knew because there was no internet. And I remember as a Demolition fan, I was just like, what's going on here? WrestleMania 6, they beat Andre and Haku, and then they're losing to 2 people I've never heard of, WrestleMania 7.
Yeah. You know, you never know. Those days, it's real weird because the only communication people had was like newsletters like Meltzer's Observer, or you had that going on, which was the fastest kind of communication back in those days, because it was a whole different world back before the internet and cell phones and everything. Now people be on their cell phone videotaping or showing the match to their friends all over the world while it's happening in the ring. It's completely different. I did my entire wrestling career without a cell phone. It was before my era, the cell phones. So I feel very fortunate in that respect. Because I was telling this to a friend the other day, we had long road trips where we just spent time talking in a car, and you get to know people, and you're sharing, your BS war stories, your blah blah, this with that girl, this with that match, blah blah blah, and it was fun. It was a fun days of traveling. The road trips I took with Louis Spicolli, Tim Patterson, Ricky Ataki, Stefan De Leon, some great friends. Some of them aren't here anymore. I treasure them for life because it was the time where you're man to man. Now you see it in the restaurant. You can see 4 people sitting in a restaurant and nobody's talking. They're all sitting on their cell phone. I've been guilty of it myself, so I know it's a different world we're in, different communications than we used to have.
Now, everyone's commented on your Ox Baker picture in the background, which you've talked about before. Michael Collins says he sees Ox Baker in the back. Was he as limited in the ring as they say, or is he a better worker than he is given credit for? I did see that video that Billy Graham shared not too long ago where he actually started a riot. I forget what town it was in, but to start a riot, you got to be a pretty good worker.
Yeah, I worked on a couple of shows with Ox Baker. I worked a show in Hammond, Indiana in 1981. The main event was Dick the Bruiser and might have been Dick the Bruiser and Ox Baker against, the Kelly twins, Mike and Pat Kelly, that were involved in the car accident with Adrian Adonis. I was in, I think, the opening match or second match of that show. But I was on shows with Ox. Ox was limited in the ring. He was a gimmick. He was a big man. He had limited mobility, but he was a true pro. He knew how to work. He knew how to cut a promo, that's for damn sure. And he was entertaining. You know, when you saw Ox Baker in the ring, you knew you weren't going to get Terry Funk or Dory Funk Jr. or Jack Briscoe in the ring, or Billy Robinson or Vern Gagne or Bockwinkel. It's a different gimmick, a different style, and he was part of it, just like Haystacks Calhoun. They all had their limited ability, and the wrestlers in the ring played off of that, whether it's bouncing off of them or whether it's reacting to Ox's heart punch. And that painting behind me was done by my friend Scott Wilson in New York, along with the one next to it, right there. And I have about 15 paintings by Scott. And but that's my only wrestling related one, was with Ox and everything. And he asked me if I wanted that, and I said yeah. That's from Escape from New York with Kurt Russell, and which, you know, Ox had a great part in that, perfect part. You know, he had to work to his limits. He had limited mobility. He was a big man, and as he got older, his knees started giving out like everybody's. His ankles, knees, hips. It's just part of the business, you know. It's no different than Terry Funk. Look at the matches that man had, and after 50 years, his body's gone. You know, he's worn out. Same thing. He gave it all. He gave it all to the fans.
And his mind's starting to go now too, and I'm sure the concussions, which we've all had, has something to do with that. Sunview would like to know if you've ever wrestled in Europe.
No, I never wrestled in Europe. I did ring announcing for Armed Forces Entertainment on a Middle East tour and a Pacific tour of Korea and Japan and Okinawa, Guam, and I was in the Middle East, but I never wrestled in Europe, England, or Germany, or any of that. I wish I had. Opportunity just didn't present itself to me in my days. I stayed busy in Mexico and other things I was doing. But I did get to do ring announcing in Cairo, Egypt, Uzbekistan, Turkey, Kuwait, Bahrain. I flew into Paris for this trip with Gene Snitsky and Lloyd Anaya. We were on this tour going to the Middle East, and then flying home. I flew out of England and flew back to New York, and then on to LA. And then I did a Pacific Islands tour of many islands that we were in battles with Japan during World War II, where we still have soldiers stationed overseas. We would entertain the troops there on those islands, along with a week in Seoul, South Korea. I was there with Honky Tonk Man and One Man Gang, and so that's my extent of traveling that far.
Now, speaking of One Man Gang, I think one of my most popular interviews of 2020 was with him, and I was surprised to learn he actually watched my channel when I finally reached out to him after years of trying to figure out how to contact him. Could you share any stories about him? Because you mentioned a few times you're close.
Gang's a really great guy. when we actually had to room together a couple of times on our trip. When we spent a week together in a room in Hawaii at Hickam Base Air Base on this trip, this Pacific tour, and I was with Gang through the whole 1 month, and I just really learned to really respect him. He's a great family man. All he talked about was his wife and his son, and he was just a friendly. I hate to use the term because I don't mean it derogatory, but he was a good old boy, and he was just a Southern guy, and just a simple man that had just one of the best gimmicks alive. That one-man gang from Halsted Street, Chicago. What a gimmick that was. I mean, I didn't care for the Akeem and all the other, that kind of junk that Vince pushed off on him. But the one-man gang gimmick, man, what a strong, believable gimmick that was. His work with Bill Watts in the 80s, tremendous. But I learned to really respect Gang. I respected him enough that we went scuba diving, not scuba diving, snorkeling, big difference. We went just snorkeling along the surface of the Pacific out by an island called Johnston Island. And underneath us was sharks swimming underneath us. And I wanted to get out of the water, and Gang said, stay in the water. He said, Big Bill, stay in the water. Big Bill, stay in the water. And we stayed in the water, and Gang had a camera, and he was taking pictures of the sharks down below us, just swimming in circles. And I said, you know what, maybe they're going to leave us alone because there's too much fat up here on the surface. They're not going to want me and you, brother. And Gang sent me those pictures, and after we got back from our tour, and I really love the guy. I mean, I just think he's a fantastic man. I know he got hit hard by a hurricane several years ago, and he reached out for help. And I know I advertised his plea for help for his GoFundMe on my Facebook page, because I knew he would never ask for help unless it was real solid, and trying to rebuild his home and everything. And but he's a really super good person, and that's why I'm going to make every effort possible as I drive through his area in Baton Rouge, New Orleans area, to stop in and see him, if my contact info is good on him still.
Although the people I've met from Louisiana seem very friendly, I would never want to live there due to the continuous weather issues that they seem to have.
Yeah, and I'm also going to be going to some real famous murder sites in New Orleans too, and everything, and some graves, voodoo priestess, and all kinds of stuff. I got some cool stuff involved now, but I wouldn't want to live in New Orleans or in Louisiana either. They don't seem to know how to build their barriers big enough to hide the waves coming over and all that. And
yeah,
from what I've heard, it's not that much better now than it was 15 years ago.
Len McDaniel wants to know, when you were working with WWF, which is now known as WWE, did you ever have established wrestlers come up to you and ask for help getting hired?
Well, I had some local LA wrestlers. Would this be like what he's talking about? I had some LA wrestlers approach me, and some Phoenix wrestlers that I kind of knew from the 70s asked me to get on TV tapings, to get seen. And sometimes I would oblige that request, and sometimes I couldn't, because their bodies just didn't resemble anything that I would have been sent through the meat grinder by Chief Jay Strongbow if I would have taken some of my friends that just had bad bodies, but were good people, good wrestlers in the ring, but not WWF enhancement or anything else talent. I couldn't do it. And I caught a lot of heat, and I lost some friendships over that because people knew, they saw me, they said, Bill, you've obviously got the contact in with Patterson or with Rene Goulet and Jack Lanza and all the agents. I mean, you could get us work. And I said, and I had to be delicate because I didn't want to hurt their feelings that they're fat, not out of shape, or they're too small. They were fine for a little indie circuit in Phoenix, or in LA, and I can think of several people, but it just wasn't going to work, and I couldn't risk my reputation on it. I did risk my reputation on a few people, and I caught grief from Chief on it, and that I really can't, I definitely cannot say publicly because it would really come back to haunt me right now.
Now, speaking of the height requirement and the body requirement that there used to be, would you have ever guessed these days that there would be world champions that wear shirts and have big beer guts, or like wrestlers that are not too much over 5'5", 5'6", 5'7" in there as champions in WWE?
No, I would have never expected any of that to happen. Uh, I use Rey Mysterio Jr. as an example. I've known him since he was 15 years old. I wrestled on shows in Tijuana and Ensenada, Mexicali with him back in, I believe it was like 91 or even before that, when he was wrestling as a Calibre, which means a hummingbird. And this is before his tattoos and before he did steroids and things like that. And Ray Oscar is a really very, very, very nice person. And he had to get bigger and to get taken seriously by bigger organizations. He was a hell of a talent. But I was on the show where Rey Mysterio Sr. changed his mask and said, "From now on, you will be called Rey Mysterio Jr." and all that. And I would have never expected him to go to WWF and become world champion ever. It would have been, I'd have said you were crazy. Not because of his talent by any means. He could outwork me. He could outwork 90% of the people I knew. But it's not always a matter of your work. It's the look and everything. And so slowly, Vince changed a lot of that. And I don't know a lot of the other guys that are currently wrestling, or I don't know whatever Brian Daniel or Daniel Bryan, whatever his name is. I know he's a good worker. I don't know him at all. So I can't really comment about how their size or anything, but obviously they were able to prove themselves. Again, it's just a different era. You know, when I was around Vince and all that, they thought Bret Hart was too small. And Bret's a pretty decent sized, average looking guy. And, but there was a lot of heat on Vince putting the belt on Bret. And look at that talent. Look at the legacy he came from. So you can see how far, to me, in my opinion, which means nothing more than a cup of coffee to a lot of people, but you see how far the business has changed and gone another direction from when I was around it back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Vinny Boom Boom says hello, and he wants to know if you have any Baron von Raschke or Big John Studd stories. I know Billy Graham was close with John Studd.
Yeah, I don't have any Baron von Raschke stories at all. I've just met him through going to CAC reunions and meeting Baron. I know of his legacy, of course, through the magazines and everything. And he was a great name, a great amateur wrestler too. And Vern Gagne trained him, and that's what I know about Baron. I wrestled Big John Studd at the LA Sports Arena in probably about 1987. Yeah, it would have been because I started ring announcing for them in like 88, and it would have been before that. John was a very nice man. Every time I was ever around John, he was really a gentle giant of a man, very soft spoken, a good person, another solid family man, a good person at all times. Always saw him being very nice, and I love being around John, and he treated me with great respect in the ring when I worked with him at a house show at the LA Sports Arena, and can't say enough good things about John Studd.
And speaking of the LA Sports Arena, would that have been your favorite arena to wrestle in and perform in, or was there a different favorite to ring announce, to wrestle, and to referee?
Well, that's a great question. I have specific great memories from the LA Sports Arena. It's where I got my start with WWF doing ring announcing for several years. I had great matches there with Paul Orndorff, Wildman Jack Armstrong, Alexis Smirnoff, Gordman and Goliath for WWF. I wrestled, I think I wrestled the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, one show there. Wrestled SD Jones. I had a lot of lot of good memories from the LA Sports Arena, and it's really sad that they've torn that building down now. But I also have a lot of great memories from the Olympic Auditorium, which is now a Korean church, and wrestling John Tolis at the Olympic Auditorium, and being in the ring there with Mil Mascaras, and in a battle royal with Andre the Giant there and Pat Patterson. Those are really special memories of the Olympic, and where I didn't do ring announcing, but I did do refereeing for WWF there. When they had to go back and forth between the sports arena because there was remodeling being done. And they hated going to the Olympic because Vince thought that building was too outdated and too old-fashioned for his newer look of the World Wrestling Federation. And I understand and actually agree with him in a lot of respects. But you had to do what you had to do venue-wise, and he would go to the Forum in Inglewood and run some shows, and that was a good venue too.
Rick wants to know your thoughts on Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer. I don't know how much he wrestled on the West Coast, if you ever had any.
Yeah, I never even met Buzz Sawyer. I heard a lot of stories about him training guys and hurting them up in, I think it was the Bay Area, which I didn't have much to do at that point in my career with. Buzz was up north, and I was in Southern California. And Buzz had a different style of training people and a different outlook on things. I never professed to be a tough guy and never acted like I was, and I never tried to dissuade anybody from wanting to be a wrestler. I never said, "Oh, you're too small, you're too this, you're too that, you can't be a wrestler," because Kurt Von Steiger and other people gave me a break when I was just a skinny teenager, a 6'2" and 150 pounds, 175 pounds, trying to break into wrestling. Nobody discouraged me. I mean, they gave me some stiff workouts, but they did not hurt me, and they did not tell me, "We're going to break you to get you to not want to be a wrestler." And that's what I heard. A lot of people had claimed that Buzz did that and hurt people deliberately. I don't know any of that to be a fact. Was not around Buzz. The fact that he died young, that probably doesn't surprise me either, because it's just the lifestyle.
Donnie Brasco wants to know if it's true Andre did not like Macho Man and Big John Studd. I
cannot even say with 100% certainty if that was a true statement or not. I never saw any of that animosity in the dressing room. I only saw professionalism from Andre, and I was around Andre on probably minimum 100 shows at least. And I never saw a negative comment come from him in my view with any of the boys, of him working with Jake Roberts. I know Andre didn't like snakes, and I was in the dressing room and Andre had to get stitched up by Dr. Bernhard Schwartz when one of Jake's snakes, a tooth broke off in Andre's chest, and Andre had to have stitches. And he still wasn't upset or complaining about anything. I just never saw any of that personal animosity with Andre and the guys.
And since you brought up Jake the Snake, that reminds me, on this very channel, folks, you can actually look up the Mega Church match between Bill Anderson and Jake the Snake that he was kind enough to let me post. Just search it up. And one of the best wrestling promos you'll ever see, even though I guess technically it's a sermon, was Jake the Snake's speech after that match that he did at that Mega Church.
You are correct on that. That was in 1996. That's a real big match in my life. It really brought me closer to Billy Graham in 1996. We'd been friends for many years before, but we became brothers during that time. And the same with Jake. And Jake was straight. He wasn't on any alcohol or drugs or anything. And that promo he does afterwards is a shoot, unscripted shoot promo. that he talks about the abuse his family had gone through and that he was involved with in his lifetime. And I can tell you this, I have an atheist friend that told me he was in tears after watching that interview because he knew Jake, for one thing. And just to know that Jake was bearing his soul on that interview, that Pastor Tommy Barnett is interviewing Jake after the match with me. Jake puts a snake on me and all the demons come into the ring. And then Jake goes back to the locker room scene. It's what we call the locker room scene. And it's a shoot right from when Jake punches that locker and busts his hand open for legit. It's something to see. And I would recommend anybody to take the time. You don't have to watch the whole show if you don't want, although I recommend the whole thing. Billy Graham does a testimony in there where he talks, well, he displays his abuse of pills and things in that. There's a brief 10-minute match with myself and Jake. There's other things involving the match. It's not all just religion, but it's something I think a lot of people can get out of. Something there. And it's Billy Graham wrote this script where it's called The Empty Ring. And it's because a wrestler's battle, the toughest battle in a wrestler's life is not in the ring. It's what you do with yourself out of the ring. And that's why Billy is smart enough to understand that and wrote that script for this play. It's called an illustrated drama in church lingo. And we took that very seriously. And I took it as just another gig for me. I was living in California and I came over. Billy hired me to wrestle Jake because I had been in the ring with Jake and I wasn't afraid of snakes and that sort of thing. And but I saw a different way of living for a long time after that. And it was because of Superstars influence and Pastor Tommy Barnett and Jake Roberts, for that matter, at the very final altar call when Jake tells Pastor Barnett that Big Bill Anderson's ready to come to the ring. And you can all see that. And I think it's really important if you want to take the time to see it. I think it's less than an hour long, 45 minutes to an hour long. And it really is something.
Yeah, and it is true that the in-ring part is the fun part and the easy part, and it's the outside the ring with all the politics, and even if you have a good spot, the stress and the backstabbing you have to deal with to keep that spot. And if you're a lower card guy, where you're going to get your next paycheck, how long are you going to keep the spot you're in, and then when you're outside of the spotlight, where are you going to get that adrenaline rush from? It pretty much explains it pretty well in that video.
Yeah, it's really tough. And, you know, something that you alluded to yesterday, you're talking about Warrior and all the politics and Hogan and Warrior competing, you know, maybe for a top spot and everything and the backstabbing and all that. You know, when you're at the top, it's vicious, you know. I mean, maybe when you're at the bottom, I mean, I personally, I could care less about it. I was just glad to be working. That was just my point of view. That was my mindset back in those days. I didn't care. But I wasn't top echelon. I wasn't Warrior and I wasn't Ric Flair and those guys. They have to sometimes beg, borrow, and steal to keep their spot. And there's a lot of jealousy goes with that. And it's hard, you know. Like I heard that there was something where Warrior had to apologize to some kid because he was rude to him at an airport or something, and you were perfect for that. Your response was, "My God, you know, you're traveling. You know, God, aren't you allowed to have a bad day with dealing with the public?" I mean, we all have had it. We're human beings after all, you know.
And
so
that might have been the 50th kid that he met that day. I've been around some really famous wrestlers where literally you can't walk 10 feet on the street without somebody stopping them. And I've been thinking to myself, my God, I'm so happy I'm a heel because I could just walk past all of these people. But it's got to be a pain.
Exactly. I went to a karate tournament in 1989, something like that, in LA. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was putting this on, and Chuck Norris was involved. And Chuck was sitting ringside trying to watch the fights, but people kept coming up and interrupting him because he's Chuck Norris. I had never met Chuck Norris before that. I have since. And so I was like other people, and I walked up and I said, Chuck, can I get your autograph? I was marking out for Chuck Norris. And he said, sure. And he stood up and he signs an autograph. And I said, can I take a picture with you? And he said, yeah, take a picture together. Then other people were doing that. And he had I think his back to the ring, actually, where the fights were going on. And I know at some point I heard him say to people, I really did want to watch the fights. I came here to watch the fights. And I felt bad for him because I was just as guilty as everybody else, taking time away from what he was trying to do, was be there and just enjoy, the karate. That's his whole life, and enjoy that. And I when I met Kareem Abdul-Jabbar that day, he was not I didn't feel he was a very friendly, nice person. But again, I bugged him and said, hey, could I take a picture with you? Because I've been following his career since he was with the Milwaukee Bucks playing basketball, and he was a legend, and I used to really love basketball. So I was thrilled to meet, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And but people have to understand that it's tough. And I know, as me, most of my career, not most, maybe half of my career, I guess I was a baby face as just Bill Anderson. A lot of times I was under a hood as a baby, but usually as the mercenaries or something else covering up. And I was a heel, and I could get away with maybe being a little bit rude, leaving the ring and say, get out of my face type thing. But there was a time I had blood all over me. I was a baby face, and some little kid comes up to me at some arena somewhere in California, and he says, can I have your autograph? And I felt bad because everybody's watching me, but I'm trying to react to the juice. And I said, can you please wait till I take a shower? And I said that, and I hated even turning the kid down as a baby face, but I have to protect the business too, and do what I had to do. And it's sometimes rough as a celebrity in that respect. And obviously Warrior was a much bigger name, and it might have meant the world to some kid that Warrior would even talk to him.
Apparently this kid his family was friends with the McMahons, which is why they made him do the apology. But as I said, I've seen him. I was at some conventions that he was at before he passed away, and he seemed to actually take a lot of time with fans. So it could have been just one bad interaction. It was at an airport, and we all know what the schedule's like for the WWE champion, especially if you're getting close to missing a flight or something.
It's true. That's true. We don't know the circumstances, so anything is possible. And like you said, it could have been the 50th kid, and he was already running late. It could have been a number of scenarios. But I can just tell you that Warrior was always the greatest around any people I brought to shows, friends or wrestlers in the dressing room that came to me and said, that were my guys that would say, hey, Bill, can I take a picture with Warrior? Okay, I'm not going to approach him. Will you approach him? I said, sure. So I'd walk in. I say, hey, Jim, you got a second? He said, yeah, Billy, what's going on? I said, I got a couple of guys that want to take pictures. He says, bring them in. And he was always like that with me. And, it's just whatever makes a guy happy, and it made my friends happy. And, it put me over because everybody knew, my guys knew that Warrior came before them, and Louis Spicoli and Sting and those kind of guys were before them. So, it gave me credibility to my boys. And, but I always appreciated that from Warrior, that he didn't treat me like some mark, like, done with you. I got everything out of you I could use. And,
Yeah. Tony wants to know what your thoughts are on how COVID has affected professional wrestling.
Oh my God. I mean, it's affected the whole world. I mean, it's horrible that, concerts were canceled, and any event with crowds. I think it's going to take still a long time before people trust being around other people. It's been a horrible event that's happened in all our lives that no one expected to ever happen. I'm just hoping that we're getting through this, and we're slowly heading toward the right direction. And That's why I made the decision to get the vaccine shot. And I know a lot of people say it's BS or whatever, but I wanted to be in the statistic of doing it that way rather than the other way, trying to push our country in a direction that they're opening businesses up, opening sport events up. I know the baseball team here in Phoenix, the Diamondbacks, are allowing like a 1/3 capacity or something like that into the stadium. So it's a process of allowing concerts and sporting events back. Obviously, a lot of promotions took a big hit over this. Everybody did. I mean, you can't just say WWF or AEW or anybody. Although I can't imagine anything more horrible than wrestling in front of an empty arena doing TV tapings. That would just suck crap.
Are you surprised that WWE has gone this long for their Raw and SmackDown shows to go back in front of crowds, which I think mid-July in Houston, Dallas, and Fort Worth, they're going back to crowds. But NXT, they've allowed like 100 fans. And one of the things that bothers me the most about trying to watch it with no fans is the fake "this is awesome," the fake boos and the cheers. When you see there's no crowd and you see that the people on the screen aren't making this sound, it's like at least put 100 fans in there.
Yeah.
Give us some kind of legitimate reaction.
Oh yeah. I personally, I can't imagine. It reminds me of a show I was kind of forced to work on because of California Athletic Commission back in the 80s. And I think Michelle Starr was on that show. In fact, I'm almost positive he was. And Tim Patterson were on a show. We did it at a bar in LA. And it was such a low crowd. There was poor advertising put out, even though we had a newspaper ad. It's still poor response, poor location, bad. And the athletic commission was there to get their cut of the box office. And they told us, you can't cancel, you have to wrestle anyway. And there were so few people, we got such small reaction. It was just so hard to work because you play off the crowd. That's at least the way I wrestled. I did most everything off of crowd reaction. So it really stinks. And I feel sorry for all the guys the last year that have had to work with no crowds, and really stinks. And I don't like the phony, reaction thing to, this is awesome. And, that whole crud. And, but I don't know, we'll see what happens as time goes on here and we get our life back to normal.
Now, you have several books out, picture books that I have one of them, but I'll let you plug where fans can get these books. Billy Graham wrote the foreword to the one that you sent to me, but they're great books for people that are fans of particularly the 80s era, because you have a lot of pictures of stars from that era.
Yeah, I have my first book is kind of out of print, so to speak. I don't have a connection to get copies of that book any longer. It's kind of a weird story. That's a book that Paul Bearer did the foreword on, that he was gracious enough. And he told me when he did the foreword, I emailed him at the time and asked him if he would do the foreword. And he said, no one's ever asked me anything like that before. And he said, I'm honored. And he did the foreword for my first book. Unfortunately, the first book is out of print. That's a book I did on my wrestling students. And my second book is the book that you have, Devin, that I did on Big John Studd, Bruiser Brody, Hawk and Animal, the Road Warriors, mostly Hawk, I think at that time, because Animal was still alive. And Freddie Blassie and John Tolis, guys like that. And that was what that book is about, Red Bastien. And then my third book is a book on paying my respect to the luchadors of Mexico that have passed away. Many of them were friends of mine. I have a great deal of respect. Now, I would watch a Mexican wrestling show on video now, still to this day, before I would turn on an American wrestling, because I have a real sense of respect for those guys. I've always been a fan of the sport down there for 50 years. And I wrote a book called Big Bill Anderson Remembers His Fallen Friends of Mexico. And the book in the United States, it's harder to sell it across borders because of the price of shipping and everything. But in the States, you can buy the book, and it's at bigbillanderson.us is my website. It's a very small website. I'm just promoting 2 books and some pictures I sell, autograph the pictures. But Billy Graham will autograph the foreword for my second book there that I was talking about. It's got Big Boss Man on the cover and Bruiser Brody. And I had a great endorsement after that book when I met Brody's his wife in Vegas, and Barbara, and she came up to me and said, "You're Bill Anderson," and I said, "Yes," and she said, "I'm Barbara Goodish. You wrote a story on my husband for your book, and I love it." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank God that I didn't embarrass her or do something wrong. I was afraid I did something bad." And but Barbara Goodish said it was great, and she appreciated me acknowledging her husband, who was brutally murdered, and I hope Jose Gonzalez goes straight to hell, and piece of crap. And so that's my second book, and Billy Graham will autograph that too, as well as myself. Will personalize it and everything. And but those are my books. I don't really promote them all that much, maybe as much as I should, but it's just, it's a part of my life. And I have other books I want to do up here on wrestling even, and I just haven't gotten to it. Part of it's as I get older, it's harder to focus sometimes on all the things you need to do. Sometimes it's easier to sit in your recliner like an old man and rock back and forth and watch TV. But I do, I'm very sentimental, and I pay my respects where I can. And part of it is in these books to my fallen friends. And part of it is when I make a road trip, like I'm going to do to Ernie Ladd's grave and Paul Bearer's grave, and one of my favorite rock bands of all time, Leonard Skinner's graves, in 3 different cemeteries in Jacksonville, Florida. And, and never met Gino Hernandez, but I know he tragically died so young, and I want to go to his grave and pay my respects to his grave. And if I can find it, I'm going to go to Gory Guerrero's grave in El Paso. And I have several other places to visit along the way. And that's my big road trip coming up.
Now, you mentioned Mexican wrestling. I doubt you've seen this, but it's making the rounds today in the news. I'll put up this clip because it's only 5 seconds long. This is a wrestler named El Vikingo who assaulted a fan in Mexico, a small child. You may or may not have seen it.
Yeah, I have seen that. Absolutely horrible. And I don't know if you've seen what they've done since then, but he has done an apology to that kid. They have gotten together with other wrestlers. Octagon, who is one of the top baby faces down there in Mexico, they got him to meet with the kid and the family and bring that guy, that luchador with them that assaulted the kid, and apologize as deeply and probably very sincerely to the kid. I saw the video of that also that they've done, and rightfully so. Obviously, I mean, you shouldn't do that to anybody, much less a child that doesn't even know better. That little boy didn't have a clue what he was doing, and to be thrown around, he could have had all his teeth knocked out. It's absolutely ridiculous.
There's a fan on here, Ken the Terminator, that was asking about your role in the movie Ed Wood that you recently posted a picture of. I'm going to see if I can put it up while you're talking about
it. Yeah. Yeah, that picture was taken outside the Olympic Auditorium, and Gene LaBelle got me my part for that. Introduced me to what was that director? Sometimes I'm supposed to think before I start talking. I can't think of his name off the top of my head, but he's a very famous director, a friend of Johnny Depp's, and Johnny Depp was in the movie, and Sarah Jessica Parker and Bill Murray. And I was a referee in a scene with George the
Oh,
Animal
Tim
Steel.
Burton.
Tim Burton. Thank you, Devin. George the Animal Steel playing Tor Johnson wrestled a masked man played by Jesse Hernandez, and so I had a nice scene in that movie. But Gene was, he called me into the ring at one point. I was just sitting in some seats, and he says, and then he called me up to the apron, and this is before we started shooting. And Tim Burton comes walking up, and he says, "Tim, I want you to meet a friend of mine, Bill Anderson." I mean, Gene is just first class, And I got that role strictly because of Gene LaBelle. And I'm still pissed to this day because they left my name out of the credits. They did not put my name in the credits. My name's in the call sheet and everything else, but I'm not in the credits. And it's one of the first things a real rookie actor / stuntman always does is make sure you make friends with the right people that are in charge of all the credits, because that's not the only movie. Body Slam, I was left out of the credits too. And that's another movie that really upsets me. And two movies. And a guy with my limited ability and name, I can't afford to be left out of credits.
Yeah, I was in the background of It Too, which was a horrible movie. And I actually sat through the whole thing just to see if I would be in the credits. So, yeah, that was not fun. And they also did put me in the credits, but at least I got a good payday out of it. Last fan question I'll ask, because you've already been very generous with your time. We'll end it on a UFO question since it's in the news so much lately. KJ wants to know if you witnessed the famous Phoenix Lights UFO.
No, I wish. That happened, I think, in 96 or something. I was living in LA at the time, or California. So I did not see that. I wish I had. And I'm glad we're going to be ending this soon, because I'm looking at my battery on my phone and I'm losing down to almost nothing. I did not witness that. I don't believe those were flares like the government said they were. I believe it was extraterrestrial. That's just my opinion, of course. Others say they had followed that thing, come all the way down from northern Arizona through different people, incredible people, from doctors to policemen and that sort of thing. I do believe in UFOs, and now I guess it's becoming more public that they are out there, and the underwater ones too. What do they call those? The USOs or whatever.
Yeah, unidentified submerged objects. But
yeah,
as we found out, they're actually called like trans something, because they can go. Most of them can go into outer space, in the air, and underwater.
Oh my God.
It's pretty much the same. There's some connection with water. They keep going underwater.
Yeah, that's been witnessed by a lot of people. So I would love to see that. I do believe in it. Like everyone says, I mean, we can't be foolish enough or naive enough to think we're the only humans in this universe. And there has to be something else like us. I don't know. Maybe nothing else like Herb Abrams was with the UWF. But there are other forms of life.
Definitely, and we're supposed to be getting more and more information coming in June, because there's a report from the Senate Intelligence Committee, I believe, that's going to be going to different levels of government. And it's certain that some of this information is going to leak out. Even President Barack Obama came out a couple weeks ago on 60 Minutes and says he's been aware of UFOs, as in unidentified objects in our airspace that's restricted, and they're not supposed to be there, and there's nothing we can do about it. But I know your battery is going to die, so I'm going to let you close this off before your battery closes it off for us. Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thank you, Devin, for the opportunity to speak to a lot of great fans out there. And I appreciate everybody asking the questions, and keep tuning in to Hannibal TV. Devin's, he's on the cusp of what's happening with you, whether it's UFOs or in the wrestling business. He's on top of it. And, so I advise everybody to keep watching. And I'm on Facebook. And, if anybody wants to ask me more questions or something like that. And thank you very much, everyone, for asking your questions. And thank you, Devin, for considering me for a little bit of time here. And I talk forever with you, but my battery's down to 13%. And at some point, it just cuts off, as you know these things do. And I did an interview a while back with somebody, and it just cut off midstream. So that's real embarrassing.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video